Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining Ashley and I at our table as we dive into our second episode of Applied Spiritual Psychology. I'm excited that we are on this new road, that we're carving this beautiful new path, and that we're taking the time to apply all of these energetic frequencies, all of these different momentous occasions through our spiritual experience and how they can show up for our mental well-being, for the decisions that we make in order to become this full, wholly aligned, beautiful self. Thank you for joining me, Ashley. I am very excited to dive into today and tell people about this idea of withdrawing within the heart chakra.
I am I'm here, y'all. You're gonna have to bear with me. Slow loading.
It is morning. It is morning. How are you this morning? What is going on in Ashley's world this morning?
Ashley is living over in La La Land, so I'm trying to pull myself back over to reality.
It has
Uh,
been a wild few days. I think a lot of people are living there, especially with all of these storms across like half of the US right now, is just in like this flurry of insane energies.
it's definitely like Mother Nature stirring the pot, y'all.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it is so fitting for what we're going to talk about today, too. And for those of you who don't know, currently I live in like Middle Tennessee. And so there is so much flooding happening like generally around my area. But don't worry, I'm okay. I'm safe. There's nothing crazy happening where I'm at. I'm also just from like 3 hours north of here from Louisville, Kentucky, where they have had tornadoes. There was like a mudslide on part of the expressway last night. Like they're having unprecedented weather.
Oh man, I saw that. I saw the NOAA release about it, and I texted my sister because she's over near Clarksville, and I was like, "If you need me to watch the weather for you."
Right, right. It's a lot right now. And, I took this time yesterday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast, and I looked out the window and everything was calm. And there's these trees. I honestly don't know exactly what kind of trees there are, but I suspect that it's like a hawthorn bramble that's back like as soon as you get to the woods that back up to the yard of where I live. And it had all of these beautiful white blossoms all over it that survived all of these like 50 to 60 mile an hour winds. Like they're still attached. They're just in this beautiful blossoming glory and they smell so good as you walk outside. And it was this little beautiful space between the storms where I could sit there and be like, storms create beautiful things.
That is very true. And, Texas is starting to hit wildflower season too. So as I drive back and forth along the highways and stuff, you'll start to see some of the paintbrushes and then just some of the like normal, I don't know what they're called. They're not the really bright yellow flowers. They're not dandelions though.
Are they the zinnias?
I'm not sure. I really don't know the name of it. So it's a common weed essentially here. Uh, it's just a very brighter yellow than a dandelion.
Okay, I will if we can get a picture of that at some point, we will have to look it up because absolutely I want to know what this flower is.
But yeah, like you'll have like all these different flowers blossoming along the highways, and like it just reminds me of why I love Texas so much, especially in the spring. Soon, all the bluebonnets will be sprouting too.
Oh yes, I love bluebonnets. They are some of my absolute favorites. I also decided I have these I love gardening and I love plants and flowers, and I decided to buy these pansies that were at the store. They were like an impulse buy, but they all looked so sad. They were sitting outside of Kroger and they just all look so sad. And I was like, I have to take at least one of you home and make you happy. So I got a little like basket of like yellow pansies and I brought them home. And that was probably 2 weeks ago now. And they've also been sitting on the back patio just like enjoying the storm. And I checked on them in that little ray of sunshine yesterday and they were just all perky and happy. And I'm like, okay, so long as you're not like dying, we're we're good to go. I also went ahead and speaking of storms, because storms are going to be a big part about of what we talk about today. I had these indoor plants, these beautiful little spring flowers that my mother-in-law was gifted. She also will notoriously tell you that she can't keep a plant alive to save her life. So I took over the charge of taking care of these plants, and I had also these sun stars. And the sun stars were like halfway surviving and halfway not. And so also in that little like glimpse of sunshine yesterday, I had this thought. I was like, oh my gosh, it's time for me to put all of these plants outside. So I went in and I grabbed them and I took them outside. And as soon as they hit that like wet air and that warm air, they all perked up. And so even in this like crazy stormy atmosphere, there's so much life that is being born in it, and it's invigorating to them in a way. And I think that we'll find as we talk today that there's ways that we can also tap into that plant life energy and reinvigorate ourselves after we weather a storm.
Absolutely. It reminds me of that saying, April showers bring May flowers.
Yes, all of the time. I think about that so often, especially as I often get down in April. Like most people get down in the winter time, and I love nice gray stormy weather, but I'm so much craving the outdoors during April. As spring comes around, I want to feel the dirt beneath my feet. I want to go explore the forest and I want to be outside and enjoying life. And the rain often keeps me shut in a little bit. And then I remind myself April showers bring May flowers, and that May is so beautiful and it is so nice and calm. And it's this beautiful transition as we get closer to the summertime that we get to experience. May is probably my second favorite month of the year.
It's a little bit mixed here because some years, March and April are the best weather you're gonna get. And then come May, it's 100 degrees and you're melting if you go outside in Texas. So,
That's very fair, very fair. I will say I'm blessed to be more in the middle region of the United States.
right.
We like to say we have four seasons here, and because every time I've talked about moving up north, they're like, you only get snow, and then I talk about moving down south, and they're like, you only get sunshine, and I'm like, you know what? I like my four seasons.
Just put me in the middle. It's called balance.
Right, right, exactly. And I think that, going into that idea of balance and looking at withdraw in the heart chakra, because as we were preparing for today, we were talking about what withdrawal looks like. We're weathering these storms, we're going through these difficult times. People currently, there's a lot of charge and energy in the atmosphere, in personal lives, as in a social whole right now, as we face one of the most interesting political times in United States history, where I think no matter what side you're on. There are things that you can shake your fist at, things that you wake up in the morning and you're like, why? There's a lot of unprecedented things happening around us that are out of our control and are creating very tumultuous storms in our atmospheres.
That is a very apt way to describe what's going on.
Right? I tried to like pick very specific language because it is, like I know lots of people on all sides of this who are currently like just at the mercy and whim of what's happening. There were a lot of people who supported this huge change, who thought that there would be a lot of positive reinforcement of what they needed. And all of a sudden, like yesterday, the stock market had the worst day it's had since the Depression, which is a lot.
Kidding. Yeah. I don't know. I see people still holding out hope. So only time will tell. You gotta weather
Absolutely.
the storm to get to the flowers, I guess, right?
Abs you do have to. And I think that's part of like weathering it, because again, no matter who you are or where you're at, there's this sense of needing to get to the other side. No matter where you're putting your faith or where you're putting your energy, there's this idea of getting to the other side. And in this idea of withdrawal, when we don't have a certainty of where we're going, what our next step will look like, what our next event is going to be or where we're going, we tend to, I liked what we said, the withdrawing into self, that retreating into self, going into things that we know are comfortable. I know a lot of people who have been very tempted to fall back into addiction lately. There have been a lot of people who have been tempted to falling back onto, we'll use big air quotes here, support systems that are incredibly maladaptive, including people that they should not be accepting support from. Um, there's a lot of people that are moving back into this idea of trying to find some sense of comfort because things are so uneasy that they don't know what's happening next.
Yeah. So, like when we were first talking about withdrawal, right? Retreat was what came to mind for me. And um, underlying that whole withdrawal around the heart chakra, it's this whole sense of facing this period of uncertainty in your life, right? Not just nationally, but in your personal day to day life. There's this just huge feeling of uncertainty, of the unknown, and what to do with it, and what's going to happen. And when we experience these things, we tend to try to find that comfort. We try to seek some sense of safety, right? And if you never really had that ability to develop this sense of security in self, right? The sense of safety in being able to move through things, and you've never really developed and cultivated this resiliency that allows you to keep moving through the storm to get to the other side, right? Then you will likely either retreat within to yourself and pull away from people in your life. Get lost in a book, get lost in a movie or a TV series. Americans, we talk a lot about addiction, substances, and alcohol, but we have huge addictions to technology and entertainment media. And we don't talk about that. And that's one of the biggest escape mechanisms that I see in my day to day life is this need to retreat into some fantasy world. And, I'm calling myself on it too. I admit it. I've been in La La Land. I've been lost in fiction, and trying to avoid like anything that's in front of my face that I don't want to deal with right now. Um, but it's it's just we don't want to, we don't feel prepared, better yet, um, or equipped to be able to walk through that storm and make it to the other side of it. We don't know what direction it's going. We don't know what direction is safe, and we want to take the path of least resistance. So since we have all of these things in front of us that we don't know where it's going, we try to find some kind of sense of safety, whether that's going back towards what you used to know as safety that you now know is not, right? An unhealthy relationship, maybe. You might find yourself going into unhealthy coping mechanisms, things like that, that you've already established are not good for you, but you don't have the resources and tools to replace those. So you want to go back. But, this time period is really asking us to find new tools in the storm, find new resources, find new ways.
Yes. I love how you mentioned that we have so many other addictions that aren't, going to pick up a bottle or, moving back into drugs. And we can move away from those incredibly maladaptive tendencies and into something else. Like in my life, I'm a person who has lived in various aspects of recovery and needing to weather my storm, needing to learn how to do different things in order to really transmute these tumultuous energies into something that is more productive. And I have found recently that I am now addicted to going to the gym. And I will tell you, there has never been a bad addiction in going to the gym. It is absolutely not maladaptive at all. You're taking care of yourself, you're taking care of your body, you're increasing your endorphins, you're reducing your cortisol levels. You're doing so many things for your body in those positive ways when you find these other ideas when we move into what I like to call like our healthy mental wellness toolbox. I'm a big fan of the mental toolbox. I think that it is fantastic. And for those of you who haven't heard me talk about this or have never heard anyone else talk about this before, your mental wellness toolbox, if you can imagine a box and you put all of your healthy coping skills into your box, think of it like a mental health first aid kit. You put all of these tools into this box and you can categorize them however you want to. Mine often looks like those little recipe boxes that our grandmothers all had that have like the cards in it. And so that way I can like mentally pull out a card and it has a word on it. And it's like, okay, well, today is the gym. Well, how do I get through, this particular storm is making me feel, I feel depression coming on. I feel anxious about my situation. I'm needing to lean further into reassurance. What can I do to mitigate this from happening? I know these signs, I know these triggers, and I'm moving towards this because of this storm. So instead of doing something maladaptive, I open up my toolbox and I'm like, okay, how do I get through my depression? Pull out a card and it's okay, focus on daily tasks. Just daily tasks, not extra tasks. And then that way I don't start falling behind and making that depression feel worse. And I know that my daily tasks are showering, brushing my teeth, making sure that the trash is taken out, and making sure that I have clean clothes. Those are my four basic essentials. And that is what I focus on when I know that I'm about to fall into a depression. And we can use these different tools in our toolbox as we need them. Like once we start to see those triggers of moving back into bad addictions, I hate using the word bad, but to move away from maladaptive, not so good addictions, we can use those as a substitute.
Absolutely. So, I want to bring up the the Book of Lines. I usually pull an I Ching gate to kind of like give us additional guidance and direction whenever I pull energy, right? And the gate was gate 3, and based on the Book of Lines, which Absolutely love, and I cannot pronounce the author's name, so you'll have to forgive me for just avoiding that at the moment. But on gate three, the overarching theme of it, that the Book of Lines gives you is tradition does not give it does not easily give way to the new, the unknown, and the untried. And the old energy, right, that is problematic is either internal is this sense of analness, like you have to focus on and do everything this way, right? And you become obsessive about it. And then the external side of it is this sense of disorderedness where it's just everything everywhere all at once. And of course, that transformative energy that overarches it is chaos, which is literally the storms around us, the political climate, everything. There's chaos going around, and you have to get to this space of innovation, right? Of looking around and realizing that some of these tools that you had in your toolbox don't belong anymore. And
Yes.
you need to literally pull those cards out, and you need to look around and allow yourself to innovate and create something new that will help you going forward in order to reach this place of innocence. And innocence, I don't mean as like you don't know, I mean as this absolute fresh slate, right? Of shedding the old in a completely like untried way. Because we always equate innocence to like children, right? Like that's our huge association. And in some sense, I've seen people equate innocence to ignorance, like you just don't know. And in a way that is true, right? Because it's untried. You don't know. And that's fair, but it's not naive. It's informed, right? Well, this isn't working, so let me try this instead. And just really allowing yourself to experiment, come up with that hypothesis and be like, well, this is my problem, and here's all the details of it. Let me really just define that problem and then look at, what are the potential solutions that I have at my disposal? What new solutions can I create in order to not have this problem anymore? And that is that slate of innocence, right? Is where those old beliefs, those old behaviors, those old choices no longer affect you. You've literally wiped the slate clean. You are the caterpillar that went through the metamorphosis to become the butterfly, right? Like completely different creature. And that's the innocence energy that I'm talking about. But if you're falling back into tradition, right? Tradition is that old, established, repetitive, over and over and over and over again. You cannot move forward. And chaos is literally the energy that shuffles the cards and forces you into a space of looking at things and approaching things in a different way.
Absolutely. I'm like sitting here as you're talking about it, I'm like doing the little snaps with my hands because absolutely. And I love how you brought up the idea about how people equate innocence with ignorance. And I see this happen so much to move into the idea of like relationships and how this shows up in relationships because relationships have storms and they're having storms right now. Like there's so many people that I know that are having issues in their relationships. And one of the biggest things that I am finding myself telling them is that they need to take note of the lessons that they learned before and trust that just allowing their partner to be who they are. And for if my friend listens to this and happens to realize that I'm talking about them, I love you. I'm just using this as an example. Um, all you have to do is all you have to do is allow your partner to be okay and stop overthinking, stop over muddling it, stop moving through this chaos and thinking that you're supposed to fix When instead you're supposed to have that innocent outlook. You're supposed to come through it and say, okay, so this is new, this is fresh, something happened. We're in this different territory now, and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to move forward. Well, one, you allow them to have their emotions. You allow them to move through this the way that they need to move through this, and you be there to support and you be there to reinforce how you can become trustworthy, how you can become stable for them again after a mistake has been made, after a storm has been gone through. And then from there, their response is, well, how do I fix this? How do I move through? I just want them to know that I am so sorry. And I'm like, you have said that you're sorry till you're blue in the face. You can't say that anymore and it means something more intense than that. They're like, but then I also still have needs and it's so much of this must need, must need, must need, must need. And when I say move yourself back into simplicity, move yourself back into that idea of innocence, of this is something new, this is a different chapter that you are in now, they're like, I already have all these lessons from the first part of it. And I'm drawn to because you sent me a screenshot from your book or like a little picture from your book. And I'm drawn to the first two parts in this. The being organized, embracing the whole picture in front of you. So taking those notes, I love how the book says trusting that confusion becomes clarity, and you keep in sight all potential outcomes. So you can organize that. You can make a map.
So the line right above it is the one that was really jumping out at me. Confusion is cleared up through your dispassionate review, not through worry and anxiety. So it's saying, step back. Look at that
Yes.
whole picture without the emotion that is fueling the fire and really look at, what is working, what is not working. Look at what's really happening. Where is the truth between what you perceive and what they perceive? um, and allow those notes to help update your internal model. Like I've
Yes.
said before, betrayal is this it's not about them, it's about you, right? When we feel betrayed, we lose trust in ourselves because we have this internal model of who this person is based off of our perceptions. And we expect them to think a certain way, to act a certain way, to choose certain things, right? We have this internal model that like this little software program version of each person in our lives, especially those closest to us. And it says that if this happens, then they will do this, right? And when we suddenly become betrayed, right, it's this sudden realization that what I thought you would do is not what you did, right? And all of a sudden, we stop trusting ourselves. So my point is we have to learn to update the models, right? We really, really like to cling on to these existing software programs, these existing structures, and use those as our reference points. But we have to be willing to continuously evolve and update our internal models of these people that are in our lives, right? Letting go of the old pieces and adapting them to make new pieces.
Yes.
Just as the child grows up, you don't expect your child to behave the same as a toddler as whenever they are 10.
Exactly. And I think that that so much also fits with, when we have this expectation and something derails us and we are taken out of that realm of what that expected outcome is. A big theme in what we're talking about is kind of being able to look at the uncertain with that certainty in self and the way that you approach it. And I'm drawn to that next line, and it also the mental muddles will compel you to try many disorganized and scattered endeavors. When we're not so sturdy in our self and in the way that we're approaching things and in taking this organized view and
And
allowing uncertainty to exist, then we become this flustered, like there's a word there that has like a curse word that I don't want to use because this is, on all platforms. But but you become this like mess, this discombobulated puddle of
The-
resources, big air quotes there.
It's the Tasmanian devil. He's just literally spinning around, just throwing things everywhere.
Yes, it is absolutely that because, and yeah, you're just like, you're trying to hit everything at one time. You're like, okay, well, if I pull out that utility kitchen drawer and just throw all of the contents at my partner or at whatever's happening, one of them is going to be the answer. And when you do that, all you have done is just throw things at your partner or at this situation. You haven't actually like fixed anything because along with finding a solution and along with going into those nice, sturdy, stable, adaptive coping skills comes understanding, there's instructions, there's needs, there's communication, and none of those things can be found in that Tasmanian devil whirl or in that kitchen utility drawer. Your kitchen utility drawer has like batteries and flashlights and safety pins in it, and all of those are great tools. But you have to learn how to use them in certain situations. And so when we need to take this idea of being organized, it is about like creating that map. I love that idea of creating that map, seeing how things have worked, where and getting rid of that I love the word dispassionate in this so much because it's removing that passion which we often teach ourselves that we need, especially as people who identify spiritually. But remember, think about it as in the divine masculine and the divine feminine. The divine feminine is the passionate one. That energy is that creativity, that flow, that creative momentum that just kind of flows out of us without having direction. And it's that divine masculine that gives it direction. It's that that organized box that we put it in. So when we take out the passion, we're left with that scheduler, that organizer, that map maker that shows us where we can go and what tools we have to navigate uncertain waters. If we were I'm suddenly reminded of this movie, this really funny movie, without a paddle. And there's a part in the movie where they're just kind of like following the river because they've lost everything as their boat turns over. And, we have other tools. We know which direction the sun rises and sets in. We know the directions of how shadows work with a different plant life and things that we can see as in regards to time of day. There's different things that we can utilize that we may have forgotten about also. And when we make that map, we can take that inventory. And I'm reminded so much of what Ashley said, and while we're taking inventory, opening that mental toolbox, you can throw out all those cards that aren't going to work, that no longer work for you, and that aren't any good.
So, for me, passion always simplifies down to attachment, where we are very attached to and invested in a specific outcome, right? Especially our expectations. And when we're invested and passionate about our expectations, and that governs other people's behaviors, that gets us into trouble. So, when you're looking at that dispassionate review, you're stepping back. It's important to really like lay out your own expectations and your own perceptions, right? And have a conversation about it. And, say, hey, this is what I expected. This is how I perceived things. This is how I interpreted it. And then give them the opportunity to share their own. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about getting on the same page. But that's never going to happen if you're reading two different books.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's also where the next part comes in that I really, really, really love. And that is the maturing, the diligent application, where, as you're going through and you're realizing which book you're in, which story you need to follow, even if it may be a book that you haven't ever read before, and you're taking those tools with you. You're going in prepared. When we were first talking about this before we started the episode, and we were talking about how uh how this is, I think I mentioned how this is like finding foundation. Yeah, the hope after the storm to create the foundational roots of moving forward. And you were talking about um the idea of like retreating, and I kept seeing as we were talking that spiral that we
Hmm.
often talk about how we evolve into the higher self, and we keep coming back to these different aspects. But every time we come back, and this also goes in with that idea of like innocence is not ignorance, we come back to this new part in our spiral where we're experiencing the same situation. It has a different face, it has different needs, it has a different catalyst. And we're also different. We have gained a lot of tools. We may be in a new place of, we talk about often spiritually rebirth. We go through rebirths all year, every year. There's a whole cycle dedicated to it at the end of each Gregorian year. And from there, we come to this place of, okay, I'm looking at this situation with new eyes, with new ideas. I know what didn't work before, and I know what I haven't tried yet. And I feel
So
like that's part of that maturity.
it is absolutely. And, going back on my previous metaphor, you can't keep going to the same book over and over and over again and picking it up, expecting to find new answers. If you've already read the book, you've already tested the theories, right? Pick up a different book. Maturing is realizing that it's okay to let the tradition of that old book go and pick up a new one and give it a try.
I love that. I love that. And I also, looking at it too, and this is also talking about uh tending to rely on the advice and ways of others. I think that it's also important here because there's a lot of us who get stuck in this part of the cycle where we're also only listening to ourselves. And Lane and I have talked about this before, early on when we were doing the tarot episodes. We were talking about, how the devil shows up before the tower, before the star in the major arcana. And that is so much of that idea of like rebirth and finding those roots. But when we're in that quote unquote devil moment, when we're talking about the cards, we're in this point where we're like, well, these answers absolutely cannot be the answers because I've already gone through this. Yeah, I've read this book, but this is the book I need. And so when we're stuck in these stagnant waters, going back to also what you said about how, going back to those maladaptive coping skills that we know are going to keep us in the past instead of move us into even not even just the future, but even into our present and into who we're supposed to be. Sometimes we need to take a book from someone else. It's okay to take a book that we haven't read from another person when they're offering it to us and saying, "Hey, maybe you need to look through these pages and see what this book may give you to work on this."
So, yes. However, I would also add that, it should be other people's advice, other people's, books that they have written, literally or metaphorically, right? What's worked for them should be an inspiration for you, right?
Big snaps.
You to find a way, like if it fits, modify it, adapt it, allow it to make sense for you and your situations. Don't copy it. We are creatures that love to copy and imitate. It's just a developmental thing. That's how we learn, is through imitation. But we don't have to get so stuck in that imitation that we cannot evolve it to our own internal natural behaviors.
Yes. I think that that is a really, really important thing, because when I say take a book from someone else, I'm not thinking about copying it. And I thank you very, very much for breaking that down because it's so important that we make whatever we're doing our own. Because our lives are not the same as another person's. We can learn from their experience, but it's that word learn and not carbon copy.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of being on Pinterest and you're kind of like scrolling through people's like decor and organization and you see the things that you like and you kind of just disregard the other things and you start to kind of put the pieces together. Well, my house isn't set up that way. So how could I make this type of like a mudroom, for example, or an entryway? How can I make this entryway work for my house and my layout? And you start to kind of take those little pieces that you really like about other people's stuff and how they went about it. And you start to kind of pull it all together, all of those ideas, all of those pieces into one whole picture that works for you. And after you put it together, you might realize that you never use it because you always come through the garage. So you might have to go back to the drawing board again, picking up a different book and taking inspiration a different way and figuring out how to adapt that entryway organization for coming into and out of the garage instead of the front door.
Yes, yes. I also I think that that's so important in the ideas of, like when we're coming out of our storms, when we're in this place of dishevelment after the chaos has kind of thrown our cards everywhere. Um, I think a big part of that whole picture and the idea of like the house, and I know you love the house metaphor, um, is that our previous experience is like what we've learned that moved us through that is very foundational. It's that concrete foundation, that slab that we're building our house on, or our basement, whatever foundation looks like for you. And then that sturdy, like center column of the house is the previous experience, and this storm came in and like blew all of your rooms apart. And learning new things, this idea of putting new experiences, looking into uncertainty, but stabilizing the self, knowing that you're not going to fall back into maladaptive tendencies, knowing that you're not going to allow this to define you're not going to. I actually I'll make a confession here. I really struggle when spiritual people identify with the chaos. And that's coming from like a chaotic goblin, like in my own right. I am definitely what you would call a chaos goblin in every single aspect of my life. But when we make that our definitive identity, then we can't bring in the energies of permanence and stability and all of these other things with it. So restructuring those rooms that we're rebuilding in a different way so that way they can weather the next storm in a more adaptive function. Would you say that that's a good metaphor for that?
Yeah, I would tack on, that you don't have to wait for chaos to come and pull everything apart because we're human. We grow, we change, we evolve. That is the one constant that you can always count on, is we will always grow and learn and change, and our needs will change. So you may be working with the same house, and that's fine. But you may need to pause very regularly, whether it's monthly or it's quarterly, or maybe it's even yearly, just depending on how your own growth rate is and your household's growth rate, and really look at what's working and what's not working. Like I consistently am looking around my house, noticing things that pile up where the clutter tends to catch. And after it has consistently happened for a good 3 months, I will start to look at ways that I can start to put some structure to that chaos. Like, okay, we gravitate here and these things gravitate here. How can I put a system or a structure in place to help tame that? Right. And it's like the metaphor I used with the Pinterest, and you set up this beautiful entryway that's all organized, but you don't ever use it. So it's looking at and recognizing that you might have always used the front door, but then things changed and now you're using the garage. And you have to adapt and change your systems. But we have this tendency to hate change, and we want to stick with what we know and cling to these things, no matter how much it does not work for us anymore. In some cases, we will make ourselves suffer in order for the sake of preserving the system because it used to work. So we tell ourselves, well, I just have to make myself make this work again, instead of adapting it and allowing it to evolve as we grow, as our needs change, as our patterns change, right? So get comfortable with growth.
Yes. And I love that. That also fits with like the third part of the book that you shared with me, that idea of scrutinizing, finding out what works and what does not. And I know that, we have both talked so much about reevaluating during this episode, but it is the whole point of this episode is that you have to be comfortable in and again going into that idea of like the devil card and identifying with the devil card. You have to be comfortable with looking at yourself as if you are not perfect, you have not figured it out, and you don't have it all together at all times. Like that is at every single time of the day, of the year, of the week, of the month, of the part of your life that you're in. There is a way you can grow. We are
Absolutely.
never done growing.
So withdrawal is the idea of going back to and getting stuck in old systems, right? Which is why we keep focusing on how to safely and comfortably step into new beginnings, into newness, into innovation, into change, right? Because we're trying to help you move through that tendency to withdraw and go back to that old familiar thing that we've already established isn't working, right? And find new ways to bring in clear perspective and organization that works for you, approaches, tools, resources that work for you where you are now. That thing used to be great. It was fantastic. But like everything, the more we use it, it starts to break down. And eventually it needs to be replaced. Sometimes upgraded, sometimes you can use just buy the same version of the old tool and it's going to work just fine. Some things are tried and true. Other times, you know, technology advances and we find better ways. And it's about being willing to adapt to those better ways and look for those better ways in your day-to-day life without holding on to, grandma's cast iron skillet that it basically is a sneeze away from the bottom dropping out because it's so rusted through. And I don't know who you are, but you know exactly who I'm talking about.
I have a few people in mind.
Like somebody's listening to this that literally is holding on, clinging on to this cast iron skillet. Like,
Look, rust also does all kinds of other nasty things to the human body. So buy the new thing. Just go to the new thing.
and so the fourth point that the book made was realigning with your purpose, right? Because the day-to-day chaos, we tend to lose sight of our intentions. And when we talk about living life as a prayer, it's about being very intentional. It's about being intentional and knowing exactly what you're walking towards, right? If you're lost in the storm, remember where you were trying to go and look around for the signs. It's like driving in the middle of
Absolutely.
a storm on the highway, and you get so distracted by the like torrential downpours and everything else that you suddenly like lose all sense of direction. So just stop and look around for the signs on the road that are guiding you to where you need to go. But remember your direction and where you're trying to hide, because if you're just spinning around in circles, overwhelmed by this torrential downpour going on, you're never going to get anywhere and you're going to stay stuck in the storm. That is the chaos goblin, right? The Tasmanian devil.
Yep. The chaos goblin. Like I cannot again, as a person who self-identifies and who socially identifies as the chaos goblin, um, I cannot stress how true this is. Like it has been an integral part of my experience. Again, and just, I don't often do a lot of self-disclosure here, but to do some right now, so that way maybe some of you can see that this is exactly how this works. Like I'm a person who like beat the dead horse until the dead horse was no more. Like I went through and I redid every single thing thinking that I knew how to go through everything. I was a hard worker. I was diligent. I did what I thought was best for my family. I did what I thought was best for myself. And I look back at that person now and I'm like, good God, she was a hot mess.
So there's something that I told you the other day, and I'm not gonna like put your business out there, but it's very, very apt here, right? We're so used to spiraling downwards, breaking ourselves down, that we need to get into the habit of starting to spiral ourselves upwards.
Yes,
Building.
those words. I can't tell you how many people I said that to after you said that.
Exactly. No more spiraling down, only spiraling up is allowed.
Yes, yes. And yeah, and and you are welcome to put that out there because yeah, like there are still times where I need and I will go to Ashley and be like, "Hey Ashley, I need you to remind me why I'm doing this."
But it's important to have those kinds of relationships with others that when you're stuck in the storm and you're just kind of spinning, someone that can be like, hey, look at me real quick. Stop spinning. Just look at me. You know, where are you going? Where are you trying to go? What do you need? And
Well,
it helps you stop and recalibrate.
yes, and that goes along with I know that the associating is specifically like realigning, like associating purpose with events that you're like events, steps, or actions that you're taking to move through it. And I often talk about, especially in support group for anybody who's ever been in support group with me, and if you haven't, please come. You are absolutely welcome to. I talk about our soul compass and I talk about our true north a lot, which a lot of people don't come into connection with this idea of thinking. I've also learned that it is typically a very non-secular idea of thinking. And I, whatever as far as that goes, because this is like a pivotal thing in my personal experience and in working with others and helping others find what they associate with and how they're aligning in their lives, the soul compass is like such a core element of that. And I challenge all of you out there to create your soul compass. Write down on a piece of paper, make a circle, and put down what your true north is. Like, where do you morally, ethically, and emotionally align with? And then also around it, write down the different things that help you associate with that. That includes support system. And yes, that does mean that, if you have a support system that's got some dead roots that are like, encroaching on your roots and trying to kill pieces off, sometimes you got to lop them off. And that doesn't mean that you have to cut off contact with people. That just means that sometimes maybe that person shouldn't be in your support system. We can be friends with people without having them as a part of our support system. And it goes along with identifying what you want your life to look like. My witchy friends, we often talk about manifestation, looking at what exactly it is you want life to look like, feel like, and do for you. And this is part of that soul compass too. It's putting in there absolutely everything that aligns with the truth of who you are and who you want to become.
So I need to say something.
Please and thank you.
Okay. If you do not know what your soul compass is, if you are so confused and cluttered and chaotic around what that is, there's a very good chance that you were stuck in imitation. Again, we like to imitate and copy. And as we are growing, as our brain is developing, we learn through imitating, right? And so all of these expectations that others place on us, all the role models that we've observed, we copy them. And we end up cultivating this sense of worth through other people's acceptance and praise, right? And if we do not let that go to start cultivating a sense of self, then we become really attached to what other people want from us and what other people expect from us. And we get stuck with fitting in. And y'all have all heard my whole metaphor about fitting in and slicing pieces away from ourselves, right? But if you are really struggling with that sense of identity, that sense of who you are and what you want and where you want to go, step back and start really looking at and defining. Get a piece of paper out if you need to, but really start defining where you're copying and imitating, where you're upholding other people's expectations and other people's ideas of what right is, and put those on paper so that you can actually see them. And then one by one, go through and ask yourself, does this feel good whenever I do it? Does this light me up? Or do I feel like I'm literally tearing a piece of myself off every time I do it? Does it kill my soul or does it ignite it? And if you can, modify it. If you can't, scratch it out.
I love that. And I love that you said that because absolutely it is imitation. It is, trying to live a life that is not authentic to you and to yourself. Um, and I love that word. Those of you who have been with me for a long time, I use the word authentic until I like beat it into the ground. And I will keep repeating it forever and ever and ever until everyone else in the world uses the word authentic because that is like the basis of showing up for yourself and the basis of trying to come out of these storms is still remaining in your authentic self and not reverting into, not retreating into that maladaptive self. And I feel like now we've come full circle.
Absolutely. And I want to throw another word out there, and it's genuine. You can always tell when you're interacting with other people if their actions, their words, their statements, everything about them is genuine or if it's disingenuine, right? And that is what authenticity is. If that's a concept that you're still trying to figure out, it's about that genuine, true alignment where your words and actions align with who you are as a person.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that is a good note for us to end on today. What do you think?
I think so. There's just one last thing that I want to like pop in that we haven't touched on yet.
Absolutely.
So one of the points within my book that really like spoke to me as we were talking was the act of interpreting and being able to detach from anticipated results when you're implementing a new order. So again, when you're trying to organize a new approach, a new system, right? There's a possibility of your intentions being misinterpreted by other people, and that's okay, right? Because again, we have an internal model of people in our lives. When you start changing that model, it's going to make them really uncomfortable and confused, right? So making sure that you have that open communication, you don't expect everybody to receive it well with open arms because a lot of people are really uncomfortable with change, which is why we're talking about withdrawal, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are. That's exactly why.
And just be honest with and open about your intentions and give people a chance to adapt and change because we all have our own comfort level with change and how fast it happens. Me, I'm one of those. As soon as I make the decision, it comes out of my mouth instantaneously. And I'm like, yes, that's right. And I'm doing it now. Right.
Yes.
It's people whiplash. So I'll constantly change directions. But other people aren't so sure about that, and it's gonna feel like rocky territory. At the same time, as you're stepping into that new direction too, it's gonna feel rocky because it's untested, it's unknown. So allow yourself to practice. Practice is perfection.
Yes, it is. Practice is, I love that. I'm going to say it again. Practice is perfection. Um, it is, that is like the whole key to this. And especially as we go through that spiral, because you're always going to have storms. And I'll make this like my last piece in there too. You're always going to have storms. You're always going to have things that come in and Tasmanian devil all of your cards and throw them all over the place. And it is always you that you can find the stability in to know how to pick those cards back up and know whether or not are you going to leave them on the table like you did before, or are you going to put them back in the pack and give yourself that stability?
Absolutely. So if you are tempted
I
to call this week, just remember that change is inevitable and it is the one certainty of life. And it's time to get comfortable with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you need maybe a little bit of a pep up or anything like that, feel free to email us and maybe we can give you a little bit of advice or lead you to something somewhere that can help you in that. And I'll put all of that information in our show notes. And yeah, if you need anything at all, please feel free to leave comments, questions, concerns, anything across our live streams, across our episodes. We will be happy to answer them for you. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And thank you, Ashley, for sitting down at table with me and providing this very needed message for so many people right now.
Absolutely. I hope it reaches the right people at the right time, and I can't wait to hear all about it.
Same, big same. What is our energy for next week?
That's a great question. I don't know. I didn't look. Don't put me on the spot like that.
I will do my best not to. Let me see if I can pull it up before we go on. So let me see, because I know it's not that far. There it is. It looks like, oh, it's drama at the throat chakra.
Okay.
Next week
That'll
should be interesting, friends.
drama. Oh,
I'm here for it, man. Well, you all have a fantastic week. And again, any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them for us and we will answer them for you. And we will be back